Aloha and welcome to the second of our Drive Electric Dialogue series focused on the backbone tool. So again, let's go ahead and get started. It's around 10 o'clock right now, so I want to make the most of our time together. My name is Aki Marceau, and I'm the Director of Electrification for Transportation at Hawaiian Electric. And this is a part of a three-part series focused on e-mobility initiatives. As a reminder, the first was our eBus Make Ready pilot program, and that submission is up on the PUC website under docket number 2020-0098. You can also find a video of our webinar online at hawaiianelectric.com. The third will be our commercial Make Ready pilot program, which we've shifted to October 21st, 2020, so please save the date. The Commission recently approved our request to adjust the timeline. So that's the reason behind the adjusted timeline for this webinar. So we're trying something a little bit new today. You guys are on WebEx events instead of meetings. So if you are an attendee, you won't be able to see other attendees and you are unfortunately muted, but that doesn't mean you can't communicate with us. So in order to communicate with the panelists, you're able to use the Q&A tool and also reach out directly to Lisa Gyong in the chat box. But please, our preference is that you use the Q&A tool. We will be recording this webinar, so it is already recording right now. The idea, I kind of want to share a little bit about the impetus behind this. So the idea behind this webinar came about when a bunch of us were collaborating on a potential grant for from the DOE. Earlier this year. And as part of the grant, many of us kind of asked the question, maybe we should develop a tool that identifies charging needs across the islands. And lo and behold, at Hawaiian Electric, we actually had developed this tool last year, and we'd gone through an entire process of soliciting input, getting feedback, and creating the tool. And we hadn't actually had a chance to share it with the public at large. So this is our springboard into action. And my ask for you today is to keep an open mind. Like any software tool, there are many opportunities for improvement, user interface, user experience, refining use cases, many other things. And what we particularly are curious about is how you might imagine using it and how we could actually improve it. So the objectives, if you walk away with anything today, this is what I'm hoping. We have a great lineup of folks from state to private industry, and I'm hoping that you walk away with these three things. So first, to learn about large charging infrastructure projects across Hawaii by Hawaiian Electric, Electrify America, and Tesla. So thank you all for joining today. Also, to understand the universe of charging infrastructure from public to private, level 1, level 2, fast chargers, and beyond. And then third, to experience the backbone tool and also provide some input into what would be meaningful to you. And I am so pleased today because the person who will kick off this webinar is Anu Hiddle, who's the coordinator for the State Climate Change Commission. And she and the commission have been doing a lot of work around clean transportation initiatives. And she has some exciting information to share about that. So handing it over to you, Anu.
Thank you, Aki. Can you hear me? Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for having me here. And I'm looking forward to hearing about the great initiatives here today that will be described and the big actions that we're taking. So at last year's statewide climate conference, Governor Ige said that Hawaii is a small state with big ambitions because we believe that big ambition leads to big action. And that's exactly what we're hoping to hear about today. So it's actions like these that you're all working on. And I'm delighted to bring just a small portion of what we are doing at the state with the state's climate commission. So just if you will, I'll share my screen in a minute, but I'll give you a little background. So I staff the Hawaii Climate Change, Mitigation, and Adaptation Commission. It's a high-level, multi-jurisdictional body that guides the priorities of the state's climate response, and it's co-chaired by DLNR, Department of Land and Natural Resources, and Office of Planning. It consists of a total of 20 members, chairs of 4 legislative committees, and executive department heads at the county and state levels. The commission recognizes the urgency of climate threats and the need to act quickly, and it promotes ambitious, climate-neutral, culturally responsive strategies for climate change adaptation in a manner that is clean, equitable, and resilient. It was established by Act 32 Session Laws of Hawaii in 2017 to uphold the United States' pledges under the Paris Agreement, under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, now just called the UN Convention on Climate Change. It's mandated to provide policy direction, facilitation, coordination, and planning, and to establish climate change commission and mitigation, climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies and goals to help guide planning and implementation statewide. So with that, maybe I could just take you through why we are doing this work and what we're doing towards it. So I'll just attempt to share my screen here. Am I sharing? Yes? Okay. So this is our website, and if you do want to look any of this up, just to provide some context, this is the Commission's website, climate.hawaii.gov, and there is the mission statement. And just real quick, the priority really stems from a couple of statements. This one is on mitigation, and basically it's looking at transforming this one right here, state and county fleets to address VMT reduction, congestion and emissions, especially through electrification, renewable fuels, car share, and supporting infrastructure development and deployment. So that's the full range of big action that we would like to take. And as part of that, DLNR, where I am housed, started a series of clean car, sort of our clean fleets toolbox, and a series of brown bag discussions as to just how we could be transitioning our fleet. So there are some tricky challenges, obviously, as you know, that go beyond electrification. Of course, electrification is a big one. But DLNR specifically has biodiesel pilots going for its trucks, since we're still waiting for electric trucks on the market. In the meantime, we have this sort of toolbox that helps to bring our managers and staff up to speed on what's going on. So we've got an FAQ on the electric vehicle side here, and we're developing some fleet tools. So right now, what's up on the website is really only our it's only a connection to the EV hubs procurement tool, but procurement has been a big issue for DLNR. So this one is more general. So we are actually producing something in terms of costs and emissions for Hawaii specifically, and I'm working very closely and directly with Lauren Reichelt at Sustainable Transportation Coalition of Hawaii and the U.S. Department of Energy's Transportation Clean Cities Coalition, and also working with UH's HNEI staff on this. So on the one side, we're working on the costs, and on the other side with the emissions, which is of course very important, and the two do end up being related. The other thing that we're putting together is a green Car Talk. So if any of you are familiar with the old NPR program Car Talk, we are Green Car Talk. And Lauren and I host these on a monthly basis for our staff at DLNR and other folks and people who actually operate, procure, and maintain these vehicles. So yeah, that's sort of our little, small entry point into this. Of course, we work very closely with the Energy Office, the State Energy Office, and with their work on electrification and energy issues. We're also working not only on the fleet side, but looking at how the state can play a big role on the active transportation and multimodal mobility. So those are our priorities at the moment. So feel free to reach out, and thank you, Aki.
Thank you, Anu. That's so interesting. And I love both your your leadership in electrifying fleets and transportation and vehicles, but also your sense of humor with puns on words. And, you know, everyone needs of laughter these days. So thank you for that as well, the little joy that you bring into our lives. We'll hear from Cameron from Tesla later, so maybe he can say a few words about helping out with those electric trucks. But with that, transitioning over, it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Jimmy Yao, to lead our panel on EV charging infrastructure deployment in Hawaii. And he has a great lineup to share with you as well. So handing it over to you, Jimmy.
Okay, thanks, Aki. Hopefully everyone can hear me. So for those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of working with before, just a little introduction. So I've been in EV programs for almost 10 years now, providing programs such as EV rates, installing fast charging stations for the public, and doing a lot of customer engagement and outreach. For someone like me who's a nerdy engineer at heart, I find it a little bit surprising that I actually enjoy the customer engagement so much. And one of the key takeaways I do know is from talking to a lot of our customers who use public charging, is that when they need to use public charging, they need it to be available, convenient, and reliable. So with that said, I want to go into our presentation about public charging. Especially in Hawaii, and particularly dealing with fast charging. So hopefully you guys can see my screen. About 2 years ago, Hawaiian Electric filed our Electrification of Transportation Strategic Roadmap, in which we outlined 10 key initiatives in which the company can support the transition to cleaner transportation. Of these 10 initiatives, 3 of them are supporting electric vehicle infrastructure, mainly in the areas of MUDs, which historically have had issues retrofitting infrastructure into existing condos and apartment buildings. Workplace, where cars are sitting during the day, during those midday solar generation hours, and also in the public settings such as strip malls. From that, we moved on to the following year, in which we filed a planning methodology for a critical backbone study. In this study, we looked at the needs for both public and private charging by looking at our EV forecast to the year 2030. Michael will be talking about this right after us, but a little spoiler alert is that by the year 2030, the need for public infrastructure will need to increase by 7 times in our service territory, which is roughly about 3,000 added charging stations. So just a little bit about charging is right now, if you buy an electric vehicle, almost all electric vehicles come with a level 1 charging cord, which can plug into a standard outlet. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a green line on the bottom of the chart that represents illustratively 18 hours of charging, which provides about 90 miles of range. Most people at home charge this way, or if it's not enough, they will go buy a level 2 charging station, which they can plug into a dryer outlet or have an electrician installed. Almost all public charging is also level 2. What you'll see is it provides a much larger charging output and can cut that charging time down to maybe 3.5 to 7 hours. Beyond that is what we call DC fast charging. Hawaiian Electric has been putting DC fast charging out for several years now. It requires a lot greater power. And what happens is you'll see as you go up this scale of power, generally it increases the complexity and the cost to actually design and install these charging stations. What we're seeing now as an industry is moving to even higher power. So when we talk to Tesla and Electrify America, they're putting in charging stations well over 100 kilowatts. So where are we right now? So right now we have 250 charging stations throughout our state. Many of these charging stations have 2 ports and are able to charge 2 cars simultaneously. So you can see there's quite a number of charging stations. Some of them are not always available because they're either not currently working or potentially because level 2 charging is a little bit slower, they may be being used at that time. So in contrast, this is DC fast charging. If you look at the numbers, as opposed to the roughly 500 charging ports, there's only 300 charging ports for DC fast charging. Right now, Hawaiian Electric is operating 19 of these 30 charge stations. There are 8 of these charge station tacks on the island of Maui, and I'll turn this over to Greg, who is on the island of Maui, to talk about Maui and to talk about our Hawaiian Electric initiatives. So let me go ahead and mute myself and turn it over to Greg.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Nod your head. Okay, thank you. Just verifying. So my name is Greg Kresge. I am an electric vehicle owner and driver and have been since 2013. Very passionate about it. I'm lucky to live on Maui. As some of you may know, we had a very extensive program that was in place for many years, since actually started in 2012 with an investment from the new Energy Technology Development Organization out of Japan. And we had a whole bunch of fast chargers under that program, and it actually accelerated the EV adoption rate on Maui at about 200 cars per year. So now what's happening is that that was a pilot program that's ended. Maui Electric was asked by community partners, including the county and Ulupono Initiative, as well as Maui Economic Development Board, to help maintain this network after this pilot program ended. And so we filed a request to do that under what's called EV Maui with the Public Utilities Commission. And they gave us approval to be able to continue charging, fast charging, and installing fast chargers at 4 of the sites, the existing sites, that were viewed as necessary to keep this network kind of alive and running. So my job within Hawaiian Electric is actually project delivery, which is trying to get these chargers in place. And it's not only our chargers, we're agnostic. We've been working with Electrify America and Tesla and others to install electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So in addition to the EVU stations that Jimmy had mentioned, which is, and this is our kind of our EVU program, that pilot is for 25 charging sites. Like Jimmy said, we have 19 of those basically installed or in the pipeline at the moment. We have some more to reach that level. We have an additional 4 sites under the EV Maui program. So that will give us a total of about 29 sites. As the backbone pointed out, we have a huge shortfall as far as what is really needed. And so what our EVU program does, and EV Maui at this point, is we come in and we try to find sites that are compatible, available, would be good places for people to be able to charge. They have access. And we design, install, and operate and maintain the fast charging at no cost to the site owner. So that's pretty unique because we take on all of that work. And then what this does, what the idea behind it is to do, and it's also outlined in our strategic roadmap, is that it gives drivers confidence to be able to make it from one place to another without having to spend hours upon hours, sitting at a charger where maybe there aren't any services, or maybe it's after hours, or they want to be able to quickly be able to get a charge and be able to at least get home and then continue charging or do some other charging at the end of their drive. And then the other really big component of our EVU and EV Maui tariffs that have been approved by the PUC is that we in Hawaii have this tremendous amount of photovoltaic energy generation in the middle of the day. So we have a tiered program, 3 tiers, that is a time of use program with the cheapest prices by kilowatt hour for the midday hours from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., which line up with those solar generation times. So we're looking at, we're really trying to continue and, support chargers and, have smart charging for vehicles and that will provide grid services. And like I said, one of the big things about a grid service for us as the utility is, taking advantage of those renewable generation times when we can actually truly displace fossil fuel use with renewable electrons. And that's a super important part if we're going to get to our renewable future. So And I'll turn it back over to Jimmy.
Thanks, Greg. So the other interesting thing is that we are, at the end of this year, going to be filing a request for more commercial rates, particularly in the area of high demand charging, high capacity charging, in which you'll support not only high capacity DC fast charging stations, but also hubs. So one of these partners that will hopefully be providing hubs of charging stations is Electrify America. So I'll turn it over to Aaron Young from Electrify America to go ahead and speak, and I'll show your slides in a second.
Great. Thanks, Jimmy. Can everybody hear me? I want to nod. Okay, great. So thanks, Jimmy. My name's Aaron Young, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. I lead our utility partnerships at Electrify America. So that's working with folks like Jimmy at HECO on our infrastructure deployments. So I'm going to talk through a little bit of background of who we are, and then also share our technology and what our plans are in Hawaii. Great, thanks. Yeah, so if you want to switch to the next slide, Jimmy. So Electrify America, we're an owner and operator primarily of DC fast charging infrastructure. So as Jimmy had alluded to, it's the area on that chart which is super high power. It's about getting people a quick charge very quickly in a short amount of time. We're focused on bringing that charging technology to drivers who do not use proprietary connectors. So we're focused on all the different automotive makes and models that are out there. And what we have set out to do is really set kind of a baseline level of infrastructure that provides drivers with confidence that they can adopt an electric vehicle and get a quick charge and be able to use that vehicle for all of their needs, whether it's long distance or getting around a city. So today we have over 2,000 individual DC fast chargers across the mainland United States at 450 different locations. I'll talk a little bit more about that technology in the next slide, but we've been around here for 3 years now, and we're continuing to make our investments, and we plan to have 3,500 DC fast chargers at 800 locations by the end of 2021. Next slide. So talking a little bit about our technology. So as a company at Electrify America, we believe that customers need public, fast, convenient, and reliable charging outside of the home. And so that's what our mission is to deliver to customers. So from the public standpoint, we look at locations that are 24/7 accessible, but we're also focused on standard connectors. So that's CTS and CHAdeMO. As well as ensuring that customers can access our stations with, just a credit card. So a lot of stations out there have required memberships and apps and things you need to sign up beforehand. We wanted to break down some of those barriers so that customers can really just access our stations like they would a gas station. Then on the fast side, our focus is primarily on 150 and 350 kilowatt fast charging, and that translates to about 9 miles of range per minute plugged in at the 150 level and up to 20 miles of range per minute plugged in at 350 kilowatts. And of course, that varies based on the vehicle's efficiency, but the overall aim is to try and get this closer to an equivalency of what customers are used to on internal combustion vehicles. And then next, we look at making sure that our locations are at convenient places with amenities nearby. So it's well lit, it's safe, and there's something to do while you're waiting for your vehicle to charge. And then lastly, and in some ways the most important here is reliability. So we've really put a lot of effort into creating an organization that has robust reliability for our chargers, and our aim is always to make sure a customer is never not able to get a charge at a site. So we have a 24/7 customer center, contact center, which is dedicated to just supporting our network. We have a testing center, which is near our headquarters, where we test all current EVs on the market, as well as prototype new vehicles from different automakers to make sure when those vehicles come out, they're going to be compatible, because it is a little bit more complex than just dispensing liquid into a car like we have with internal combustion. There's communication, there's high voltage power involved. And then we also have a network operations center where we have engineers monitoring our network and ensuring that everything is up and running. Next slide. So then to just kind of close things out, so Electrify America today does not have any stations in Hawaii yet, but we did identify Honolulu metro area and Oahu as a target for cycle 2. And so what we plan to do is open up 4 locations by the end of 2021 on the island. This map here on the right is kind of giving a general sense for where those locations are targeted. Those locations will be, will have 4 DC fast chargers at each site. It'll look a lot like this picture here on the left here. These will all be 150 kilowatt chargers, and there will be capacity to expand those sites in the future based on consumer demand. But where we're at is we're in the site acquisition side of things, so we're getting final approvals from different site hosts. We've had support from HECO looking to make sure there's available power, as well as others in the state to help us identify those folks who are interested in hosting our chargers. And so, as I said, we expect to have those complete by the end of next year, if not earlier. And I would just like to say that, you know, a part of what was really interesting about Hawaii for us and the Honolulu market in general is the EV market has grown pretty substantially, just, you know, kind of naturally. There's about, the last figures I've seen is about 2% of the vehicles on the road are already electric, which puts it in, you know, some of the top vehicle, you know, electric per capita across the country. So we're really, you know, encouraged by that level of adoption, by the amount of support we get from HECO and others in the market, and look forward to seeing how successful those stations are and continuing to grow. That's it for me.
Great, thanks, Aaron. You know, we appreciate your support. I'm glad Electrify America looked at Honolulu Metro as part of Cycle 2. As you said, our EV adoption has a lot of organic growth, which is really great. Currently, a lot of those are Teslas, so that leads us into Tesla. So Cameron, I will share your slides briefly.
Hi.
Introduce yourself.
Perfect. Thanks, Jimmy. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Perfect. Well, thanks. Yeah, my name is Cameron Waldman. I work at Tesla, and I manage our charging station deployment in Northern California and also Hawaii. Lucky me. Yeah, I think Jimmy and Aaron really outlined a lot of the very important points so far. So I will add on to a little bit of that and talk a little bit about what we're planning in Hawaii for Tesla. Jimmy, you can go to the next slide. So I always like to start with our tagline. Our goal is really to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. So everything that we do is really focused on that mission. Jimmy, next slide. You know, I think we get a lot of attention about our vehicles and transportation, but also like to remind everyone, you know, generation and storage are 2 key components of our company and part of our company's goals. So 2 programs that we're really starting to ramp up on. Not quite as visible as our vehicles and our charging, but super critical to the overall mission of Tesla. And really, we think this whole ecosystem of generation to storage to transportation is absolutely critical. So Jimmy, next slide, please. Yeah, so I think, Jimmy, you did a great job at kind of outlining the differences between level 2 and level 3 charging, which are what we really focus on in our charging program at Tesla. I think it's really critical to think about both of these products and their use cases, because really a successful charging plan for Hawaii especially is coming up with, you know, the hybrid deployment of both of these solutions. So level 2, I think everyone knows in Hawaii, it's super important to be able to have home charging, being able to wake up every single morning with a full charge is really the way that every EV owner should go about it. whether it's at home or I guess the second option would be workplace. That's also fantastic. But I think we all know that that's not always the case. Not everyone has workplace or home charging. So that's really where level 3 charging comes in, especially in Hawaii. It's really going to be that product that really opens up EV charging to a lot of the locals that do not have access to home or work charging. Like Aaron and Jimmy said, the ideal locations for these level 3 chargers are typically at places people want to go and spend, an hour, 45 minutes or so, maybe on a weekly basis. We envision that there are people that don't have home or work charging, and they can come visit a level 3 charger, in our case, a Tesla Supercharger, maybe plug in for 45 minutes, do a little bit of shopping, and then head back out on their way. So, Jimmy, next slide, please. So at Tesla, we really have two main charging products. We've got our Tesla Wall Connector, which is the level 2 charging product. Much easier to deploy, typically coming off of an existing panel. That's great for overnight charging or any charging over 2 or 3 hours. Tesla Superchargers are our level 3 DC fast charging product. Typically when we're building these, like Aaron was mentioning, reliability is super important. So oftentimes we are building at least 8 of these supercharger stalls whenever we build a site, just to make sure that, if one post has an issue, there will still be additional posts for people to take advantage of. So that's super critical in EV charging these days, is to really make sure that there is that reliability that has been an issue, I think, throughout the history of EV charging. So that's something that I think we're hyper focused on as well. Next slide, Jimmy. Yeah, so we've been busy here at Tesla for the last few years building out our supercharger program. Initially, it was really focused on long distance travel and connecting major routes, letting people drive all the way across the country or from San Francisco to LA. Since then, we've really started to also focus in on urban and suburban areas. And that's really, like I was saying, to help foster adoption amongst people that might live in MUDs, might not have access to home or work charging. So you can see we're starting to really cluster a lot of our developments into these urban areas, and I think Hawaii especially kind of falls into that bucket. Really hoping to foster a lot more EV adoption through more charging development. So next slide, please, Jimmy. Currently in Hawaii, we have on the left showing our retail presence. So we've got 2 showrooms on Oahu and a service center as well. I think some of you may have seen our Waikiki showroom down in International Marketplace. So we've got a strong presence. Sales are doing great, and a lot of people in Hawaii are looking to convert to EVs, and we're there to support it. So, and then on the right, you can see the darker dots. Those are our destination chargers that we currently have on the island. And the lighter gray dots are our near-term plans for supercharger stations. I think we've got a lot of work to do, and we have a renewed focus here at Tesla to really build out the infrastructure in Hawaii and support current owners and future owners. So we expect to make a lot of progress over the next year or 2 here. And next slide. Yeah, I think Aaron and Jimmy kind of covered a lot of these, but one thing we like to really focus on is that, building a DC fast charger on a property really brings a lot of benefits to that property. So going to attract a lot of new customers. They will often use this as their primary charging location. So can really draw a lot of new customers, drive business to the property and surrounding businesses. maybe even generate income through parking fees if it's a parking garage. And in our case, Tesla will install, operate, and maintain the superchargers. So it's really a turnkey solution. And Jimmy, next slide. Yeah, and so that's really it. We're super excited to ramp up in Hawaii. Hawaii is super unique, obviously, for many reasons, but just the fact that decreasing emissions is such a near-term issue in Hawaii and so critical that it's something that we're really focused on helping to support, and it's an urgent need, and we're there to really ramp up as quickly as possible. I guess one last thing to point out, as Jimmy I think was talking about, is with deployment of our DC fast chargers, it's very tough. There's a lot of infrastructure that goes into it and equipment that is needed. And obviously Hawaii is a bit spatially constrained. So working through that is often an issue. And we look forward to working both, with HECO and all other stakeholders and Aaron and EA. I think it's going to be a team effort, and we're all working towards the same goal. So excited to work with everyone. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I don't know, Lisa, do you want to take it over? Are there any questions?
Yes, thank you. So let's see, we had a few questions, and I think maybe it will be good to hear, from both. Some of it was for Aaron, some of it was for Cameron, but I think, all three of you, in fact, maybe could kind of respond to it. So, there is one as far as, our island of Hawaii. It is pretty big. So, most people don't think Hawaii would have long range travel, but I think definitely on the big island. So there was, just knowing that, I think what are the plans, whether it's for Tesla, when the supercharger is going to be on the big island, if you have any idea as far as timing goes, and maybe if Aaron has anything more to add as far as that as well. So maybe we can start with Cameron.
Yeah, great questions. We definitely recognize that that Oahu is bigger than most people think, and there is more to drive than most people might think. So, one of our goals is really to make sure that owning a Tesla and owning an EV is really not a compromise, so that you don't have to think differently than you would driving a gas-powered vehicle. So our goal is to support travel throughout the whole island, and we'll plan to get there as soon as we can. Timelines are tough to share in terms of our deployment. A lot of pieces of the puzzle that need to be figured out, working with property owners, working with HECO to find power and confirm capacity, getting through permitting, and then obviously construction. So there's a lot that goes into it, but we're focused on getting things done as quickly as we can.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly add, so we don't currently have any plans to expand onto any of the other islands, although we are in our planning phase right now for our investments that will happen starting in 2022 and then going for the next 2.5 years. We actually do accept submissions on our website, so electrifyamerica.com/submissions. Where we encourage people to submit, data and information about areas where it might make sense for us to expand.
Yeah, and sorry, I think I missed that you were talking about the Big Island. We definitely have plans to expand infrastructure there. That being said, we're really hyper-focused on getting things moving in Oahu and Maui first, where there are currently more owners. But it is in our plans to eventually reach most of the islands. Timing-wise, it's tough to say at this point, but we certainly want to support each island.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Jimmy, there was a question here for you regarding the high capacity charging hubs initiative. and whether that's a program that will have to be, that will require PUC approval. So if you could briefly touch on that.
So under our approved pilot schedule EVU, it was originally approved through the year 2018. I believe it was 2016. We were approved another 5-year extension. We have signaled to the commission that we feel the need that this become a permanent program. We think, you know, the backbone that Michael will be discussing shows that the need is there. So I think it will probably be next year that we'll be filing for a request to make this a permanent program.
Hey, Jimmy, this is Michael Colon. I think the question was a little bit more about the high capacity rate, possibly. And if that's the case, then the rate, yeah, we will be filing a request later on this year for approval for those rates.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay, let's see. And I think the only other question was maybe regarding for Aaron, if you could sort of talk about the relationship maybe between a super high wattage charging and degradation of EV batteries, and then maybe if Cameron or Jimmy may have anything else to add in regards to that.
Sure, I can start and briefly touch on that. Of course, you know, we're on the charging side, not on the vehicle side, so I'm not privy to any information out there publicly. But you know, from the data I've seen out there is that there's kind of limited effects. It just depends on the thermal management of the battery system in the vehicle. But what you see from a lot of the different EVs that are out there is that they typically will only be able to pull the very high power. So, you know, for a Porsche Taycan, they can pull 270 kilowatts right now as the peak, but it can only charge at that rate between, you know, let's say 5% state of charge and maybe 50% state of charge. So it's only able to do it in these certain ranges of the battery's state of charge, and it does that in order to protect that longevity. Because and automakers are making that decision based on the warranties they're providing on their vehicles and the testing that they're doing as well.
Yeah, I think that covers it. There was a study a few years ago that they compared 2 Nissan Leafs fast charging and 2 Nissan Leafs not fast charging, and they actually pulled the batteries out and did all this testing periodically. And they did show that there is a slight degradation, but is no more than anything else like high temperature or anything else that would happen in other scenarios.
I think you guys covered it.
Okay, well, thank you so much for this wonderful panel, virtual panel that is. And as a recent EV owner, I'm really excited to see all of the different fast charging options and charging options being deployed throughout Oahu. And next time I travel to neighbor islands, when I'm allowed to travel, you know, in other locations as well. So very, very excited to see all the action and the partnership. I'm really grateful for you, Aaron, and for you, Cameron, for joining us today, as also for the great work that you're doing across the island. So thank you. So transitioning a little bit to our backbone tool, and we worked really closely with folks at Guidehouse, which is formerly known as Navigant, you guys might be familiar with. And so we have Greg, who's joined us from Guidehouse, to share a little bit about what he's seeing kind of in the industry at large, and then we'll kind of transition into an actual run through of the backbone tool itself. So over to you, Greg.
Great, thanks, Saki. This is Greg. Can everyone hear me okay? Thumbs up. Awesome. Okay, great. Yeah, so, you know, we're just going to spend a couple minutes just sort of providing a couple of our thoughts. We appreciate the opportunity to sort of share a little bit about Guidehouse and Navigate. I think Michael will be pulling up some slides that we'll run through. Quickly, we'll just sort of orient people to the new organization, and then talk through, you know, sort of the mobility solutions team, of which I'm a part, that helped, you know, execute this project over sort of the May to July period of 2019. We actually filed the methodology maybe even today, and maybe it was the 31st of July, but about a year ago. And then just sort of talk a little bit about kind of what we see as sort of the most interesting and sort of trending topics that we're supporting our clients with sort of across North America and globally. And I will say I'm joined by one other individual, Grace, who was a lead modeler on the project. And so as as Michael leads through the discussion on the tool, we're here to sort of support any sort of detailed questions. And I will just sort of say one quick thing, which is Grace was working with another woman named Becca Cuss, who also helped. And Becca, fortunately for her, she's on sabbatical. She is biking from Colorado to Alaska right now. And so there may be some very specific questions that neither Grace or I can speak to sort of immediately off the cuff, but we'll happily sort of dig into it offline and come back with it. So while Grace is superior in her knowledge of things, she doesn't know absolutely everything. And we'll come back to you with any questions we can't answer off the fly here. So thanks, Michael, for showing these. I'm going to walk through this very quickly. Really, I just wanted to sort of orient folks to the fact that sort of Navigant and Guidehouse sort of came together in October of 2019. Guidehouse, or sort of legacy Navigant, had a practice of about 1,000 consultants on the energy side, and we joined with what was sort of legacy PwC sort of government arm, and we are now an organization of over 7,000 employees with 50 global locations. Not only do we support sort of on the energy side, where Grace and I sit, over sort of 60 of the world's largest utility organizations, but we have sort of a deep footprint across the US government. We support all sorts of different, really interesting, exciting work, not just in sort of government, but also in healthcare and finance. Michael, you can move to the next slide. On the mobility side, we're a pretty mature practice. We've been at this, sort of full force since 2009, really. We've done things before that, but running research and forecasting on that side of things, for over a decade now. In the last couple of years, we've done over 150 of these, sort of what we generally consider kind of electric vehicle and transportation inquiry projects. This one, sort of the EV backbone tool, sort of being one of our favorites, and I think one of the most sort of leading edge. Again, we're talking about work that Kiko sort of thought about doing basically 2 years ago, and really sort of we find that this tool and all the clients we've worked with is still sort of very much at the edge of where the industry is, and people are often asking us about it. I will just say sort of we work with network providers, we work with the equipment and the battery supply side of the equation, and we also work with a lot of OEMs. And also, as I've already said, sort of many utilities. That's sort of our bread and butter, but we are sort of operating across the whole ecosystem. If you want to go to the next slide, Michael, we'll quickly talk about something, where we're looking at right now, which is, we've got 4 panels here, and the upper left-hand panel is sort of our latest white paper, really on sort of our thoughts on transportation and how there are sort of 4 pieces to that puzzle, really around sort of infrastructure development and charging services. And sort of where we're at now is looking at sort of load orchestration. So we were, I think there was some touching on this from Greg and from others around how do we get that sort of virtuous cycle of matching generation, charging and discharging, and sort of using batteries as vehicles, and that V to G sort of opportunity that we're all thinking about. And I lead sort of our work in that space, modeling what it looks like to optimize charging and discharging, sort of as we think about grid solutions, sort of becoming more mature than they are today in the market. But people are asking these questions, and we think it's a really interesting space. On the sort of upper right, we focus really on sort of our fleet work, which is a massively sort of interesting and growing area of work that we do both globally for and sort of with companies like Amazon and other trade groups, really who are sort of pressing the sort of the outer edge of where fleets and fleet electrification can and should be, not just to reduce carbon, which is obviously critical, and reduce costs, but also to sort of expand sort of more efficient operations. And the last thing I'll sort of focus on here is just our work sort of generally on the West Coast. This obviously is sort of a key West Coast project for HECO. But we also work in California. We just produced sort of the latest statewide medium and heavy duty vehicle forecast. That is a topic that's come up today. There are more and more manufacturers in that space, and it's a space that we see as being just critical to sort of the continued evolution of where the market is going. And I think we have time for just sort of this last slide, which is just sort of a brief shot at sort of what the impacts of the COVID-19 sort of driven economic kind of the economic sort of crisis that we've seen, to put it sort of directly, has had on our expectations on what it will do to sort of global total vehicle forecasts. This is what you see on the left, and hybrid EV and fuel cell vehicle share on the right. Won't dwell too much on this. I think the picture is pretty illustrative of kind of how we see things sort of unfolding. Again, this, I'll just say, like, this is obviously sort of a rapidly evolving sort of area of interest, and things are changing sort of pretty quickly. And these analyses were done about 2 or 3 months ago, and so that always will be sort of need for updates. But in the blue, you're seeing sort of our pre-COVID forecast, and in the green, you're seeing sort of the post-COVID forecast. Our indications are that it's going to take about 5 years to kind of recover from the hit we take following the reduction in vehicle miles traveled, and just all the sort of economic impacts of unemployment sort of globally, people sort of out of work, not commuting to work, not commuting to schools, not going out shopping, combined with sort of lower oil prices. But we do see a recovery eventually sort of ticking up, and obviously we've got to keep our heads sort of focused on the future. I think with that, Michael, we're at probably 5 minutes, in which case I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Greg. That was really a great, look at not only what you guys do, but really appreciate that insight into what the anticipated impacts of COVID-19. It's been somewhat of a black box. And we do see kind of mixed signals. I know in Hawaii, we've seen kind of a resilient market for EV sales as compared to non-electric vehicle sales. But we know as a whole, the whole industry is kind of suffering.
Yeah, and I would just say to that point, like, we do see sort of a discrepancy between all vehicles and electric vehicles. And I think, those forecasts were global, so that includes sort of what's happening in China, right, which is the lion's share of the market. But you're right, these things are very local.
Great. Well, thank you again. So my name is Michael Colon. I'm the Manager of Policy and Program Development for Hawaiian Electric. Good to see everybody again. Today, we're going to be talking about some work that we've done last year, as mentioned by everybody before. And really, the tool, when we started out, we were looking for ways to design a path forward for Hawaiian Electric with respect to our infrastructure and how we would proceed and justify our role in the market. So we viewed this, the need, as trying to look forward, figuring out what the landscape would be, and then really having some flexibility to select and prioritize around certain categories or use cases. So this tool and the study really was the outcome of that, and we think that it's a first step, and we really hope that it can be leveraged for both, not only for the utility, but for the community as well, just to give an idea, an example, and perhaps be useful as a planning tool for other entities who are looking to the future to provide electric vehicle charging support. So just kind of an overview of where we're at right now from Hawaiian Electric's regulatory filings, where we're at. So the stuff you see in red is kind of what we're working on now. But what we're talking about today is stuff that happened last year. But what's important here is that it's all on a continuum. So the work that we've done in the backbone study and then identified through the work plan is being carried out right now. And we anticipate leveraging the backbone to continually support our role and identify the needs for charging infrastructure well into the future. So why did we do a backbone tool? I think I touched on it briefly, and really, Hawaiian Electric wants to use that tool to justify our role, but also help the community. So it's a kind of an amalgamation of objectives, but we'd like to do support EV adoption, and the way we've identified it is we've done a forecast at 2025 and 2030. So when I show you the tool in a little bit, you'll see that there's you can represent the demand across our service territory for both 2025 and 2030. So we kind of wanted to have that midterm viewpoint because we think this decade is actually pretty critical for infrastructure deployment and support in this transition. Another objective of the tool is to help support electric driving range. So as some folks had mentioned before, there are rural areas in the state and in our service territory, and having a view as to how that demand will manifest in the future is important to us. So this tool hopefully can help present that. In addition, kind of the flip side of more rural is more dense areas, multi-unit dwellings, which means condos and apartments. We're looking to support charging infrastructure. So EVs make a ton of sense in urban centers. However, in more dense areas, they're with apartments and condos. Unless they're building it up front, charging infrastructure is very hard to do in a retrofit. So trying to figure out where and how much of that demand will be aggregated and coalescing around these areas of higher density is really important to us. And similarly, as mentioned by Greg earlier, workplaces are very important to us because of our high solar electricity generation. Identifying places where most people are working during the day, but also where they can park their vehicles and charge would be a really big benefit for our service territory. For us as a company, identifying a critical backbone. So, we'll be looking at a 2025 snapshot and a 2030 snapshot of the universe of demand, and we can apply these selection filters, which I'll show you in the demonstration, that will help us kind of whittle down and prioritize infrastructure needs. And it wouldn't just be for the company, Hawaiian Electric. The planners could do this exercise as well and really figure out what kind of market segments they would want to serve by using this tool. A few more is identify the increasing utilization for our existing charging stations. So as Jimmy had mentioned, we've been providing charging station in the public, DC fast charging stations since 2014. And, there's by using this tool, maybe we can be more efficient in our planning looking forward and saying, okay, maybe rather than find a new greenfield site, we can be more efficient if we put another charging station at the same location and minimize the amount of cost and get the same result. Or, maybe we'll need to increase locations of stations as we further intensify our efforts. Grid impacts. So looking forward into the future, there may be a set of circuits around our service territory where in order to install electric charging infrastructure, we would need to do grid upgrades, transformer upgrades. And so having a view looking forward where those potential constraints exist will help us kind of have some visibility on where those needs will manifest. And then taking the flip side of that, where there are those constrained circuits, in the future, when the technology is there, when we've established the value of those grid services, potential aggregated electric vehicle batteries could potentially support those constrained circuits by providing grid services. So trying to leverage the tool and look forward and create the path to identify the opportunities that may arise in that future state is what we try to do with this initial step with the backbone tool. So a few things, that the tool really isn't, it's not a siting tool. So the outcome of, doing a selection filtering is it won't say I need to put a level 2 charging station on the corner of King Street and Ke'eaumoku. It's not designed to do that. The data sets, the granularity, as you'll see a little bit later, is at the census tract level, and that's reflective of the availability of the socioeconomic and commuter data that was available, and it's available at a census tract. So that's the level of granularity that the tool is representing. So it gives you an idea of where those needs will manifest in the future. So this table, it's a bit of an eye chart, but what it is our furthest out forecast of charging infrastructure demand, broken down by island, broken down by technology, broken down by the public and private universe of charging, and then broken down by use cases. So what Jimmy was talking about with the 700% is the bottom right corner where you see the total ports on the public side and the purple there. It says 3,651. That's the total need in 2030 that is forecasted as of last year for the public universe. If you look in the blue section, you'll notice that it's a lot more. And so when we get into the demo, I could show you in a more graphic way, but essentially we separated this tool between a public universe and a private universe. And what that really means is those use cases that you see across the top. So public will be where people can drive in and drive out and access these charging stations. Whereas on the private universe, you might be behind a gate, behind a fence, you might be at a workplace, it might be a fleet set of vehicles, so it's not accessible. And we thought that separating it this way provides a little bit more context for the use cases rather than kind of mesh them all together. But that being said, much more needed on the private side than in the public. But even with that said, public universe is still a very significant amount of need in the future. So I mentioned the universe. We've talked about the backbone. I've mentioned the term selection criteria. Essentially, what we're trying to do is start with this total universe of demand for infrastructure at 2025 and 2030. And then you can apply selection criteria to filter down and arrive at a backbone. And that would be a number of charging stations and technologies by location that would be forecasted using the selection filter. So that was how the company intended to use it, but we also think that there's some value for others, to the community, to take advantage of this filtering tool and figure out how they would want to support the infrastructure needs moving forward. So let me, with that, switch over to a demonstration. I got to switch apps real quick. Okay, hopefully everyone can see this. This is the home page of the Backbone tool. This is a web-based tool, so you need to log in. So at the end of this, as Aki mentioned, there will be a survey sent out. And at the end of the survey, there'll be an opportunity for you to say whether you would like access to the tool. We really encourage you folks to try and access the tool, because we're looking for feedback and ways to improve the tool and ways to understand how you as the community would use this and figure out what kind of data and how it could be presented more efficiently and more effectively for users. So with that said, this is the home page. At the top there, you have kind of an explanation of all the different tabs on the left. You also have forecast scenarios here. You have a high, a low, and a reference. So we'll just use the reference for now. Then you also have, as I mentioned, 2025 and 2030 for the forecast years. And then you can select in and out islands on our service territory. So Kauai is not within Hawaiian Electric service territory. So that county is not included in our analysis here. So as I had mentioned, there's a significant difference between the public charging universe and private charging universe. And that's represented here by this pie piece. You can see that the public charging universe is a lot smaller than the private. And again, the way we're delineating it is fleets, workplaces, and residences that are behind the gate or fence access would be private. And then publicly accessible are kind of more what you think of as like shopping centers and other places where you can just go up and charge at any time. So moving on, there's another way that the universe is represented here, and it may take a second. It's going to be a populated map of our service territory by census tract. And as you can see here, each census tract that you hover over, you can click on, and then it'll pull up a data card. And the data card shows, the way it's identified as census tract, the predicted number or forecasted number of ports needed, census population, which kind of is how the tracts are identified, plug-in electric vehicle population, and then the rest of those are criteria and how they score when we go to the next tab, which will be the backbone filtering tool. So each one of those represents how that particular census tract would be filtered in or out of your selected backbone. So for example, this one has a MUD percentile of 11, which means that there are very few multiple unit dwellings in that census tract. You may see others that have, like in Waikiki, for example, MUD percentile of 90%, meaning that it's mostly MUDs in that area. So taking that information, and it's all the way down, and that's the rest of the filtering options that you have there. And so in addition to that, down at the bottom, you have a table, and the table kind of represents at a glance all of that information that kind of is reflected there, but also shows on an island basis the year, the reference year, the scenario, so high, low, or reference, the island, the technology, and then the number of ports in the public and private universe. So, for the Big Island 2025 DC fast chargers, it's saying that you need 20 DC fast chargers in the private realm and then 24 in the public space. And then this goes down by all the different islands, all the different technologies on the table. So that's kind of a table version of the universe as it's presented here. The real meat of this tool and the benefit is the select public backbone and select private backbone filter page. So we're on the public backbone filter page. And here you see, again, our service territory, and you see all these selection filters. As it's represented now with 0 to 100 open on all of them, that represents the universe of charging need for 2025. Excuse me. I kind of view these filters similar to if you've ever shopped on Amazon. My son and my mother, his grandmother, loved to shop on Amazon together for toys, and so you can filter out, between 3 stars and 5 stars, or the price range and stuff like that. So my son, now the super Amazon user, knows how to filter out for toys and filter out. Similar here, maybe a little less exciting than toys, are the different ranking criteria that you can filter in and out for. So if I were to put on a hat of a private charging infrastructure planner who is looking to provide support for, let's say, primarily condos and apartments, if I were to filter, I'm looking for the top 40% in the service territory for density of MUDs. So then this is represented here, and these are the ones that are coming up and showing the highest amount of density. So here you can see it says 70% MUD percentile. So this is a graphic representation of what I'm trying to do here, is filtering for and focusing on those specific census tracts if I wanted to focus on providing charging infrastructure for condos and apartments only. You would be able to select from these filters, save it as a backbone, and then download the data, and then it would represent, and you would be able to identify how much of those technologies, particular technologies, level 1, level 2, DC fast, you would need in that particular use case. So say I was, instead of focusing on MUD percentile, I am a sport adventure vehicle charger company or vehicle company who wants to put charging stations only in more rural areas. So I could select maybe range support, and then it would reflect areas that are more rural and have greater driving distances between them and to the next charger. So logically, you'll see a lot more in the Big Island and some of the more rural areas on Oahu and Maui as well. For Hawaiian Electric, as I mentioned, we would be looking to try and take a cross section of all of these, try and arrive at some subset of the total amount of forecasted need as kind of a path forward. And that's how the utility was intending to use these selection criteria as a path forward. We have not undertaken that effort yet, but the establishment of the tool and following up with the community and getting feedback as to what ways that it could be improved or used more as kind of a global tool is really what we're looking for here. So that's, I know it's a lot of information, and I think the real learning will come when you as an individual can try and mess around with the tool and check it out for yourself. So that was the public backbone selection filter. The private backbone looks exactly the same. The only thing is that it starts with that base of more demand, right? So the bigger pie piece. So you would see the amount of infrastructure needed forecasted for 2025 and 2030 being higher, just because we're talking about that private backbone. The other thing the tool can do is that you can calculate load shapes, and you're able to kind of fill in here all the different inputs, and then it will graphically show you a 24-hour kind of view of load shapes. And I think I will turn it over to Grace Hallback from Guidehouse to explain further how this tab works.
Okay, great. Thanks, Michael. Can you all hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, like Michael said, what we're looking at here is the when of when charging happens. So on the other slides, we were looking at maybe the where, but here we're looking at what time of day we expect the grid to be impacted by people charging based on your selection of either the public backbone or the private backbone. So for example, if we hover over one of these lines, maybe the top one, you've got some information about how many megawatts are being requested, and then the type of charger as well. So these are split out by the technology type and then the use case. So this one, it's L2 market. So these might be individuals who are heading out for work early in the morning or heading out to run errands, and then are parking at a grocery store and charging their car, parking at some shopping center and charging their car, and then later in the day, they're heading home. So you can see that shape here. If you select a different critical backbone, the shapes will scale up or down. So you can work around with that. And then some other things you can change are the annual vehicle miles traveled, or VMT. So seeing how much people are driving, and then also the rated kW. So that's how much power the charger can deliver. You can select, you can change the start. So we expect that as technology improves, the average rated kW will increase. So you can pick different start and end rated kW assumptions. And then below these charts, so this one is for public, and then below that we've got one for private, so you can see the shapes are a little different. If we hover over the top one here, you can see that that's L2 single unit dwelling, SUD. So that's one where maybe people are, heading out for the day, and then when they come back around 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., they plug in their charger, and start charging, so the impact goes up. And then finally, at the bottom of this page, we have the sessions or utilization count. So this is the number of sessions, charging sessions, that we expect to occur for the selected backbone. This is split by use case along the x-axis, and then the bars are colored by technology type. And then there's a little band for each island. So I think it's all a pretty quick overview, but happy to answer questions on any of it. So.
Great. Thank you so much, Grace. I appreciate it. A lot went into the tool. There's a lot of input and information and data that are driving it behind the scenes. And, we really think that there's a lot of opportunity there to gain some insight and some value for, future needs, and how how infrastructure can be deployed moving forward. Let me just quickly switch back to my. So we have, we're going to be sending out at the end of this a set of survey questions. Again, here's just a general taste. There's going to be a few more, but we would really like to gain further insight into what you think can be improved in the tool and get people using the tool. So we definitely encourage at the end of the survey to ask for access, and then we can continue this conversation. So this is really just the first of many conversations we would like to have about the tool and ways to support the need that we know is coming in the future moving forward. So thank you very much. And with that, we'd love to open it up to questions. I think Lisa will help facilitate that.
Great, thank you, Michael, Greg, Grace. I don't see any questions at the moment. I think the main question was about access and how to gain that. So again, as Michael mentioned, as soon as we exit the WebEx, you'll have survey questions that will be asked, and the last question will be leaving your name and email if you want access to the tool. Okay. One question that just came in asks, does the tool assess existing 2 or 3 phase power availability? Not.
I don't know, it does not. We didn't go down to the level. So that's I think that's probably been one of the key kind of pieces of feedback and takeaways. And the reason why we did that, as I mentioned before, is the amount of the data that is available is largely available at the census tract. If we wanted to get it down to that next level of granularity, which is circuit level, we would have to essentially create the data ourselves. We would have to spend resources in getting and aggregating data at that circuit level, which would require a lot of time and a lot of resources. And so it is something that we think has to down the road, is having a greater visibility on those specific circuits. Another further step down. But yeah, that's where we're kind of limited right now.
Okay, Greg Edelman, did you have anything?
No, I guess the only thing I would say is that when you double click into the tool, and Michael did an outstanding job just sort of giving us the overview, you will see that there are, we do provide filters around development costs and what we call sort of local grid support opportunities. that information did flow from the companies. HECO, HELCO, and MECO, sort of the distribution teams provided some of that information. But as Michael said, for all those reasons that you just reviewed, like we didn't have sort of the level of granularity that the question sort of asked for, but it did tie into some information from the system, the distribution systems, overlaid to the census tract. But as you probed that, as Michael said, we only took it so far, and that was sort of deliberate. And you could take it further, but the tool wasn't designed to go that far.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions, I think some of you folks on the call had some very hyper-specific questions, so we promise that we will get back to you on those ones, but we tried to pull out questions that were relevant to the public at large. So, but thank you all for submitting all of your questions. They're really, really great, and we look forward to continuing the dialogue. So as Michael said, just to re-emphasize, we are sending out a survey after this webinar, and at the end of the survey, you can submit your name and email address, and we can start to give you access to the tool if that's interesting to you. We really, really want your input on how to make it better and improve it and see how you yourself would use it in the position that you are. And again, as a reminder, please mark your calendars for October 21st, 10 a.m. Hawaii time for the commercial Make Ready pilot program. And again, that'll be very similar to the eBus Make Ready pilot program that we discussed last month, sorry, time flies. And prior to that, we will be, as both Michael and Jimmy mentioned, filing for a commercial and high capacity rate, which might be of interest to you as well. So thank you all for joining today. We really appreciate it. Thank you for the panelists as well. It was great to get the gang back together again, and we'll see you in October. All right, take care.